Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our Eating Disorder Hope webinar presentation. I am joined by the lovely Greta and Maiken of the Eating Disorder Recovery Specialist, and we're so excited to have you both. Welcome, and this is going to be a great discussion. But before we get started with our questions, I just want to let all our attendees know who are watching. You will have the opportunity to submit any questions you might have to Greta and Maiken, and you can enter your questions by submitting them through the questions pane of your control panel. So feel free to do that at any point in our discussion, and we will be answering your questions in the question and answer portion after the presentation. So ladies, welcome. We're so happy to have you guys with us tonight and to learn more about EDRS, which stands for Eating Disorder Recovery Specialist. And you know, we're speaking about a topic that I think is really relevant to so many people who are in recovery and just trying to make it through the holidays. But before we get started on our topic for tonight, if you both wouldn't mind just talking a little bit about yourselves and kind of your current role. So Greta, you founded EDRS, and Maiken, you're the East Coast Director of Nutrition. So obviously, you know, both very involved in this organization. So Greta, do you want to start us out and just kind of fill us in on what you do and your role with EDRS?
Sure. Thank you so much, Crystal. Again, my name is Greta Gleissner. I'm the founder of Eating Disorder Recovery Specialist, as we call it, EDRS, which is an in-home and campus-based recovery support program. We provide supplemental meal support and clinical coaching, therapeutic exposures to help bridge the gap between transitioning from treatment back into your real life. And a little bit more about me. You know, I grew up in Kansas, a young dancer, wanted to become a professional dancer my entire life, ended up moving to New York City, and eventually, you know, became a professional dancer. And at the height of my career, I was dancing at Radio City Music Hall while, you know, on the surface, I looked like I had it all together, and while privately, I was struggling with an almost 2-decade battle with bulimia. Throughout that time, you know, I ended up going to treatment 3 times, and after my last treatment, when I had top-notch treatment, and I thought, you know, I was very confident, I was ready to go, I knew I wanted, you know, to make these changes, very motivated, and then 3 weeks after leaving many months of treatment, on the Thanksgiving holiday, I relapsed. And so with my personal experience, and then many years later, working with clients and seeing them all go to such wonderful treatments, and then so many of them just struggling once they come back to the stressors and places where the eating disorder first started, you know, that was really the impetus for starting EDRS. You know, really, while the treatment itself is great in the traditional system, there is a gap when one comes back to their environment. And so that's really how we got started. And that was a little over 3 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. Maiken, would you like to say a little bit about yourself and your role?
Sure. So my name is Maiken Wiese. I'm a registered dietitian. I work with a number and have been trained to work with a number of medical conditions in medical nutrition therapy. However, the majority of my background is in eating disorders. I've worked in a couple of different facilities, and I also, similar to Greta, saw that there was a real difficulty in the transition period after leaving the highly structured environment of the facility and going back into a person's life. There were the same triggers, the same obstacles, the same difficulties, and less support, an incredible reduction in support. So when I found out about EDRS and started working with EDRS, I was super excited about the kind of work that Greta's company did, and she took me on as the director of nutrition for the East Coast. So what that means is, in addition to coaching clients through meal support, grocery shopping exposures, meal planning, cooking sessions, I also interview and train clinicians to work with clients, and really, along with our West Coast Director of Nutrition, Diana Wright, we come up with the nutrition programming, training materials, and really making sure that our clinicians and coaches are able to provide the most supportive atmosphere for our clients who are often stepping down into these really tricky places, and give them that little bit of a bump of support so they don't feel like they're doing it all alone without any resources.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for sharing, ladies. And it's just so incredible to hear about EDRS. I feel like this is such a need in the eating disorder community, and so exciting to see how your organization has flourished and how it's growing. And we'll be talking more about it in our discussion. But and thank you for sharing about yourselves too. And Greta, it's so inspiring to hear how you took your own journey and used that to transform, you know, the eating disorder community with EDRS. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Crystal.
Yeah, and let's delve into our topic here. So we're in the holiday season. We're in the midst of all the hustle and bustle. You know, it's a crazy time of year. What do you both think are some of the challenges that people are facing during and after the holiday season, particularly those who are in eating disorder recovery?
Thank you for that question, Crystal. This is definitely a tricky time. And especially if you're early on in eating disorder recovery, there are a lot of challenges that can blossom. First of all, the holidays in many ways are just centered around family and food. And so it's a constant component in most settings in the holidays. In addition to that, you're also going to have the trickiness of juggling everything. And as we know, eating disorder recovery requires a lot of focus and time and attention. So it's very easy to get distracted from that with all the activity and the events. Specifically around the food, I think that there's a lot of different kinds of foods that you will see during this holiday season, foods that may not be typical during the rest of the year. You have seasonal foods, you have foods that may be new to the client or to an individual who's struggling with an eating disorder. And early on in recovery, I found that a lot of my clients and some of the clients that we have at EDRS struggle with meeting their meal plans and really bridging out of their safety net of the foods that they are not used to. As recovery goes on, it may become a lot easier, but this can definitely be a difficult time to challenge that. Additionally, people are in a different environment a lot of times. They may be going home for the holidays. If they live away from home, they won't be as in much control of the foods that they will have access to. So that can require a lot of planning. There's a certain amount of uncertainty about what kinds of foods are going to be served. There's uncertainty about when the meals will be served, and also the environment in which they will be. You know, sometimes with meal timing, specifically during the holidays, I'm just thinking back to Thanksgiving, a lot of people choose to have an earlier Thanksgiving meal. And that adds up to some struggle. If you're on a meal plan, it just means that there has to be some thought that's put into how you do that. And in certain families, there can be traditions of not having enough during the beginning of the day to save up for the meal that's later in the day. And when someone who's in recovery and is on a meal plan is going back into that tradition or that habit or just that way of life, it can be difficult negotiating, getting their meals in and meeting their meal plan when the family maybe doesn't operate that way.
Exactly. And another challenge that can present itself during the holidays would be any labels and rules that one who's struggling with an eating disorder or even chatter just between peers, family, friends, about food, and oftentimes, you know, foods around the holiday time period we might be hearing about, oh, good foods and bad foods, and as we're approaching New Year's, there's so much talk around, oh, we're going to start over, and the New Year's resolution around losing weight, and there's so much talk around that, and kind of some families or friends, coworkers, might utilize Thanksgiving and Christmas and to kind of get their last hurrah before they're going to start the new year fresh, and that can be extremely difficult to hear that type of language when you're in early recovery. Even when you're not in early recovery, it can still be challenging. Also, eating disorder behaviors. If you're used to utilizing behaviors as a way to cope through the holidays, and you're newly out of treatment, or this is the first holiday that you've been in recovery, what is that going to look like? When stress and anxiety comes up, it's the default to go back to that maladaptive coping behavior with the eating disorder. And because, in early recovery, you're not as practiced in the skills that you need to utilize that are going to help you get through. Another challenge would be body image issues.
Yeah.
They certainly can increase during the holidays for many reasons. For someone in early recovery, it might be the first time that your extended family is seeing you out of treatment, and maybe you're either a real or perceived change in your body has occurred, and there might be comments and like, you look so much healthier, and well-intentioned comments that are just very hard to hear in the early stages of recovery. Also, when talking about, uncertain food and not knowing how it might go and how it's going to be different than the regular routine of day-to-day, meal plan. Anytime that anxiety and uncertainty and stress comes up, the easiest tangible thing to go to is your body, and being critical of that and focusing on that as a way to have some semblance of control. And one other challenge would be, family. Holidays are definitely a time of celebration, but there can also be family conflicts or losses in the families, which can bring up a lot of memories and grief and loss issues, which can also be a challenging and difficult time. Yes.
Thanks for touching on that, ladies. And I think these are all very relevant issues and triggers that a lot of people can relate to and that may be facing even now. We're definitely right in the thick of the holiday season. And it means something different for people who are struggling to stay afloat and keep their recovery going. So thanks for bringing all that information. So let's talk about resources, for people who are in this phase of recovery where they may be stepping down from treatment, or, maybe have been out of treatment for a while. Oftentimes the holiday season brings up these triggers, and it's a whole new ball game all of a sudden. So what resources are available that you might suggest for individuals in recovery during this holiday season, even after? Like Greta, you were saying, with the new year, people make this all or nothing approach. Like, okay, if I do this during the holidays, then starting the new year, I'm going to start fresh. So what are your thoughts on that? What are your recommendations?
Well, I would say that there is a wealth of resources right now for people who are, in early recovery, in recovery, to further their aftercare. And the first one I would point out is that there are a lot of outpatient services that are available, that you could have an outpatient therapist, an outpatient dietitian that you check in with. I think that can be an incredible resource, and is such a huge component to stepping down from more intensive treatment, is to be able to follow up with a dietitian to be able to follow up with a therapist so that when you get to the holidays, you can make some of these plans. You can talk about some of the many challenges that we just discussed and kind of make some plans around those. I'm thinking specifically as a dietitian, a lot of what I do with my clients during this time of year is really get them to start thinking about and planning around some of those challenges, figuring out how to advocate for themselves and make sure that they're getting the self-care they need into the day and into their lives while it's very busy. So that is one source of support that you can have is your outpatient team. Another huge source of support is really gathering around your recovery allies. These are people who are maybe not professional, but they may understand and really be a source in your life of support as you've been going through this. These are people who can hear you say, you know, I really don't want to talk about food or I don't want to talk about body, and listen and really honor that. These are people who really are supportive of you kind of building this identity outside of just being someone with an eating disorder, and can hold and contain some of your feelings and thoughts around it. You know, either family or a friend. Sometimes it can be someone who has recovered and they might be more of a mentor figure. Sometimes it can be someone who's on more like a peer, as somebody who's going through it at the same time as you. Really to build kind of as many allies as you can around you so that you can lean on them, you can reach out to them, you can be there for them as well, and to start to foster that in your life. It's really useful, and I think a huge source of support, and can help you with your aftercare in that you'll have them as kind of you know, checkpoints in a way, and then the last I would say, and this is where I want to make a little bit of a plug for us, is, you know, there are coaching services like EDRS, which can give you virtual, text, and in-person coaching. You know, this is a great way of, if you're going home for the holidays, if you live far from where you're going home to, you can use us as a service to have text check-in support, to have phone check-in support with a coach who understands eating disorder recovery, who can kind of use that for accountability and to brainstorm in the moment skills that you can use when the eating disorder gets very loud. That's a really great way to plan a little additional support around things that are happening during the holidays. And then to address what you said about after the holidays, as you're going into the new year, that can be a really great way of, if things got a little out of control or it just felt like you used more symptoms than you were comfortable with over the holiday, this can be a really great way to bulk up a little bit more support in your system outside of your outpatient team. Maybe add in some meal support just to reset. Maybe do some coaching sessions, do some cooking or grocery shopping sessions to just get the habits going again towards your pro-recovery lifestyle, and to have that as something that you can lean on until you can feel comfortable doing it by yourself again. So those are some that I would suggest.
Those are great suggestions. Thank you so much, Maiken. Greta, did you want to add to that?
I think that was pretty comprehensive. I think the only thing that I would add, which is along the lines of everything that Maiken said, was that, you know, we like to emphasize kind of our 3 S's of success, which are adding structure, skills, and getting support. So those 3 things, if you have those, you have a nice chance to have a solid recovery.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, ladies. Those are great resources, and I know everyone listening tonight can really utilize that. So let's talk about relapse. This is a big thing for a lot of people, and I think a lot of individuals in recovery or who have had an eating disorder tend to have that polarized thinking, that black and white mindset where, you know, if I mess up, then it's over, which is not the case, you know, and relapse is a part of recovery. But what encouragement might you offer to someone who may have already relapsed or who is afraid of possibly relapsing this holiday season? What might you say about that?
Yes, I'll answer that. Thank you, Crystal. I really like this question because, I mean, one, I experienced a lot of relapses on my way to full recovery. And I would say for anyone listening that's in relapse or has relapsed, first and foremost, do not give up or lose hope.
Mm.
Um, if you relapse during the holidays, the first thing to remember is to not allow this to take away from all of the hard work that you have done up to this point. Um, Lapses and relapses, while they don't have to be a part of the process, they often are. And it isn't recovery is not a linear process, and it's often a 2 steps forward, 1, 2, sometimes 3 steps back. And the most important thing is just to keep putting one foot in front of the other, taking the actions necessary, and reaching out for support and keeping that hope up. I would also suggest to try to see the relapse as an isolated experience. It's something that happened, learn from it, and kind of analyze it, look what could have gone differently, what traps you fell into, and then move forward. Lastly, I would suggest to and this is the hardest, is to have compassion for yourself. It's so easy to get into that critical voice anytime with clients who struggle with eating disorders and are perfectionists and want to do everything perfectly and the right way, and to have a relapse can be devastating, particularly if you're motivated and you didn't see it coming, and you didn't get entrenched in the eating disorder overnight, and you're not going to make full recovery overnight. And so to just keep that in mind and try not to beat yourself up, take an honest approach, really look at what you need to do to move forward and get the help to do so.
Absolutely.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just agreeing with you. It's such an important message. I'm so glad you spoke on that because I think, that's what we need to be hearing is having compassion for ourselves and at any point of your recovery journey. So I'm really glad you said that. Thanks, Greta. Did you want to finish? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that, one thing that was always important to me in early recovery and just throughout my own journey is to just remember that you can really start your day over at any time. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. It doesn't have to be next month. It can be in the middle of the day, anytime. You can make changes once you decide to.
Absolutely.
It's easy, but it can be done.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Maiken, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that Greta summed it up really nicely. I think that those are all really crucial components to overcoming a relapse and especially the self-compassion piece.
Yeah, thank you, ladies. I think such an important message to be hearing, especially this time of year. So let's talk about a little bit more about the details of maintaining aftercare. And I know you both have touched on a little bit of that already, but let's say people are at a point in their recovery where, they've really decreased their treatment in terms of, whether they're transitioning out of an IOP or, whatever form of treatment they are and stepping down to something less. That can be really scary, and I think even more so during this time of year when you're facing all these additional triggers that are just associated with the holidays. So how can aftercare be maintained during this time of year?
That's a great question, and I think really critical right now. It's really important to lean in and plan with your current support system. So if you're stepping down from an IOP, hopefully you still have an outpatient therapist or an outpatient dietitian. Hopefully you've built some of those allies around you that I talked about earlier, that this is the time to lean into that system that you've built around yourself. So one of the things that I highly, highly, highly recommend for my clients is to bookend events. Now, what that means is if you're going to something that you know in advance is going to be highly triggering, or it could potentially be triggering for you or very challenging for you to connect with someone in your support system. This could be via text or voice call, to just reach out in advance and really try to set an intention, like give them some of your concerns and your worries and set an intention with them. And then after the event is done, to connect with them again and to just confirm, it went a lot better, when it was really, really challenging. To just kind of to have a point of accountability and checking in after the event and to feel that support as you're attempting to get through that event. That can be incredibly helpful for, if you're going to an office party, if you're going to Aunt Beth's shindig, and, and you just need that sense that you're connected.
Yeah.
Outside of the event. The other thing that which is a larger concept, is to really prioritize your recovery. It's very easy to get caught up in what everybody else is doing in all the events and all the planning, and that can make it very difficult to make sure that you're taking all the steps that you need to take towards your recovery. So it's really important to prioritize that. Some people will set dates in there, they'll plan things in their planner. This is when I'm having lunch. This is when I'm having a snack, and really build their day around that. But also important in making sure to schedule things that nourish you with food, also schedule in things that nourish you in terms of self-care, whether that is setting aside some time to go to a museum with a friend, or do something outside of the activities of the moment, so that you're really connecting with this person that you've been getting to know all through recovery, and really honoring that place that it has in your life. So that can take a lot of planning, which brings me to my third point, which is conscious planning. As we've spoken about, there are a lot of triggers, there are a lot of challenges during the holiday season. The fact that you're listening to this webinar right now is actually conscious planning. So you can toss that in there. You're already taking a step towards really acknowledging the challenges that can come up. The second part of that is to really come up with a plan. Oftentimes this is best done with your dietitian, with your therapist, to really sit down and acknowledge these are the triggers, these are the challenges that I think I'm going to face, and how can we come up with a plan? How can I call Aunt Beth in advance and make sure that there's going to be enough food at the event? Can I bring something so that I can be sure that there is enough food? To call in advance and find out what time the meal is going to be. These are things that can get you actively engaged and help you prioritize your recovery. And also, I would recommend doing that with your dietitian or with your therapist, because it will help you stay grounded in your recovery. A lot of times, trying to plan those things on your own, the eating disorder can take over. So it's helpful if you can check in with somebody who really can remind you of your recovery goals and keep you focused in that way.
Great suggestions. Thank you so much. Did you want to add anything to that, Greta?
Sure. I would also say always remember to not allow the eating disorder behavior, or not just remember, practice making the eating disorder behavior not an option. If you don't entertain it, it can't happen. If you decide, oftentimes the struggle is in the decision. So if you can, make sure that you have reasons to decide to, make the decision that's towards recovery, that's going to be much more helpful and put you in a less vulnerable position. Also, really building those mental muscles for recovery, and by utilizing adaptive coping skills and strengthening the part of yourself that wants to recover, so that you can decrease the strength and the loud voice of the eating disorder. And along with that, and last but not least, is always coming back to yourself in a moment. Who do I want to be right now? Do I want to be that person with the raging eating disorder, or do I want to be connected to myself, present in the moment, in recovery?
Yeah.
And always a decision. And the closer that, if you can practice, making that decision towards recovery, it'll just get more solid and solid over time.
Mm. Such great insight. Thank you so much, ladies.
Cool.
And just kind of as a final question before we move into our Q&A period, we'd love to hear more about EDRS and how this resource can be helpful for someone who's in recovery at this point.
Sure. So, like I said in the beginning, EDRS is an in-home campus-based eating disorder recovery support program. So basically, what that means is any intervention on a behavioral level, whether that's meal support, coping skills, recovery skills, therapeutic exposures, anything that one has practiced in treatment, we do with our clients, but only in their environment and individually, not in a group setting.
Mm-hmm.
And so we call what we do clinical coaching, and we call our coaches, we call them coaches, but they're actually all clinicians, therapists or dietitians. However, it's a peer-based support model, and then we require that all of our clients have an outpatient team or are in an IOP or a PHP program, as we often have clients using our services alongside outpatient treatment programs. And so we utilize the team to really take direction, since they have the relationship with the client, to really just help them execute on a behavioral level what they need to work on and their goals that they've come up with their team. We help execute that in their environment. And we coordinate care every week with their team, and we're in constant, we're constantly reassessing and evaluating the level of care and appropriateness, and are the goals changing? Do they step up, step down, stay at the same level, etc. So we're really trying to help clients, ideally during transitions from residential to PHP or PHP to IOP, IOP to outpatient, and then we sometimes have clients that need a little bit more support, and they're in between levels of care, or they might have a unique situation and can't really do the traditional route at that time. Yes. Maiken, did you want to add anything to that?
Just that, yeah, I mean, I think you summed it up very well. I think one of the things that is really critical to what we do is we're there with people on the front lines where you are struggling the most. So it can be in your restaurant that you go to a lot, but you just don't know what to order because you just stepped out of a higher level of care, and this might be the first time that you're ordering at this restaurant. So we can be there just as a reminder and a help to check in with you before you order, that you actually know what you're doing. And if you really need more support, we can help you with that as well. But I think that what is so great about the services that we're providing is that they're ultimately to foster your independence. That we're really trying to help you start to challenge yourself in your environment. And ideally with our clients, with the people that we meet who are on the road to recovery, eventually, they can feel that they can be free with food around us, and that translates into the choices they're making in the rest of their life. Sometimes what we can do, though, is sometimes we're with clients on their way in. Maybe they've never been exposed to eating disorder treatment before, and this can be, we may be the first people to kind of explain to them what's going on with them, and really kind of showcase to them how difficult this is for them to do on their own. So it's really, this can be a really good bonus to have. As I said before, it's a great way to get back on track in the new year. If you feel like you just want to make sure that your recovery is, solid, that you just add in some cooking sessions, or you add in a couple of meal supports just to reset and remind yourself, and really keep that eating disorder voice, where it should be, and your voice at the forefront, and in place. And to utilize these services can be a really great way of acknowledging that you still need help, but that you also are hopeful that you will be able to do this on your own.
Thank you so much for sharing, ladies. And EDRS just sounds like such a fantastic kind of comprehensive resource, for people who are trying to apply everything that they've learned, or like you said, Maiken, even just getting that kind of introduction to the eating disorder treatment realm. So I really appreciate you both sharing about EDRS. If someone is interested in learning more about your services or wanting to get in touch or find out how they can possibly get involved, is there a way that they can contact you?
Sure, Crystal. Our website is www.edrs.com, and our 866 number is 866-525-2766. And you can submit an inquiry on our website. There's a form that you can fill out if you want to inquire about specific services, and you can also call our 800 number.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, ladies. And thank you just for sharing your insight about, maintaining recovery during this holiday season. You both have such great insight and suggestions, so we appreciate you sharing your feedback with our audience. So now we'll transition into our Q&A period. And just a reminder to our attendees who are on air with us, you can still submit questions through the question pane of your control panel, and we will be going through those at this point. And we do have a few that I will be reading. Our first question is a really great question, and either of you can answer, both. Do you genuinely believe that there are no good and bad foods? And how would you respond/cope with hearing this kind of talk around the holiday season? Great question.
Yes, that's a really good question. Maiken, do you want to answer that first as a dietitian?
Sure. Do I generally believe that there are good or bad foods? My answer would be there are no good or bad foods. It's all foods can fit into your meal plan. It's been my experience that when you polarize foods, you cultivate this very disordered relationship with foods. But when you realize that, a donut is just a donut, apple is just an apple, a piece of steak is just a piece of steak. Like, these are all just food, and it's really about getting to know your preferences, getting to know what your body is telling you it wants, and to polarize them inhibits that. And I often find with my clients who are in recovery that it takes a while for them to really authentically understand their preferences, because they have the eating disorder puts them in that mindset. This is something that, as a dietitian, I hear people sometimes categorizing foods who don't have eating disorders, and that's a reality, that there are people out there who can polarize these foods, and I don't know if they have an eating disorder or not. That's, I'm not their dietitian, but I do know that that can be triggering for clients, and I generally don't agree with it. So one thing that I do as a dietitian is sometimes I will educate people on my philosophy, or sometimes I'll just find a way to turn the conversation elsewhere because it just doesn't seem like it's really important or relevant in that moment. I think it's always helpful, if you are struggling, if you find that very triggering, to choose the most comfortable way to engage with someone, whether it is to excuse yourself, to change the topic to other subject matter, or to take it head on if you feel that that's right. I don't recommend that you have to be so confrontational, but I think most importantly would be to connect with someone after, to make sure that you kind of address the emotions and the feelings that came up, somebody who is in your support team that you've built, and really connect to make sure that it's not something that's sitting with you and affecting you and inhibiting your behaviors around food.
Great response. Thank you. Did you want to add anything, Greta?
I'll just add a quick, I agree with everything that Maiken just said. Also, just from a personal perspective, I had a very unique experience in one of my treatments early on where it was really a food addiction model treatment, and there were clear good and bad foods and abstinent-based foods, and for the first few years of my recovery, I really followed that, and I thought, oh, well, I can never have, X food or Y food in the house, and I can't have this, and there were various stages early on that I didn't do that, but years later, and of course today, I eat anything and everything, and that what worked for me then, gradually was able to be more of an intuitive eater, and then just add anything, and food was just food at that point. Didn't have the emotional weight tied to it, and the guilt and the shame, and so I think that we really do believe in an all foods fits philosophy.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that perspective and addressing that question. So next question, my 17-year-old daughter comes out of treatment on December 21st. Should we prepare family and friends to not comment on how great she looks, or just let it happen, then deal with it?
I would say, just in my opinion, I would suggest to prep family and friends to not comment personally. I mean, if you can, any barriers that you can get out of the way, I think would be most helpful, because these comments are so well intentioned usually, but why have to undo them, undo kind of the damage that's done in the moment, where if you have a conversation, if you feel comfortable, with that family member or friend, that, let's just set some boundaries around comments, it can make it so much easier for your daughter. So that's my personal opinion.
I would agree. I think it would be something also to just engage your daughter on, to see if she is okay with you telling family and friends, and what kind of how much she would be okay with you disclosing, because you never want to disclose information that maybe she really wants to keep private. I do think, though, that if she is on board and you feel comfortable, it can really ease the transition. And unfortunately, it will happen at some point. Someone will make a comment, but if it's something that has been discussed previously, and it's not happening with the prevalence that it might if you don't say, this could help her in the moment decide, if she's not feeling like it's a constant, everybody is telling her the same thing, or unfortunately, like even these, as you said, Greta, these well-intentioned comments, if they are about a person's body right after they've gone through this experience, it can be very triggering. And I think that in our culture, there's a tendency for people to comment on physical appearance. And, even if it's all positive, it can put the attention right back on physical appearance versus what's going on with the person on the inside, and all through, what's going on with that person, what are they interested in, passionate about, what movies have they seen recently. So it can be very tricky for once you work so hard and so much on identifying yourself as much deeper than that, to be confronted with a comment that is meant to be kind and meant to be to give you confidence, but doesn't really address what's going on with you.
Yeah, great insight. Thank you for addressing that, ladies. Another question here. Do you think it's okay to have less sessions with your treatment team over the holidays, even if you aren't doing so well?
less sessions over the holidays, even if you aren't doing so well. I think that particularly if you're not doing well, I think that, you know, it would be really beneficial to have as many sessions, if not more, you know, the standard amount of sessions, if not more sessions, if you can, you know, fit them in, because if you're not doing well, you really need more support. And, you know, recovery is really about, you know, it's about prioritizing, you know, your recovery. And so, you know, we need constant in early recovery reminders, that consistent message, because we have like these built-in forgetters that, you know, the minute you leave the therapist or the dietitian's office, the thoughts of recovery could go right out the window. So we really have to just continue to hear the message and attend to all appointments that you are, you know, that's clinically recommended to attend. It's not a time, particularly because it's a stressful time often, it's not a time to go lighter on the treatment, in my opinion.
I think it's such a tricky time of year because sometimes clinicians are out of town as well, celebrating their own holiday events, and it does become very difficult if you find that you're struggling. My instinct would be to bring that to your team to see what they say and see if you can set up some additional support systems either with them or with a substitute of some kind, but to come up with a plan around it and not to feel like you are making that decision all on your own.
Yeah.
Because you do have this team there, and even if it isn't possible that they can up their time with you, they might be able to help you come up with a solution that gives you some additional support while you're going through this trying time.
Exactly.
Definitely. Yeah, great answer. Thank you, ladies. Another question here. Is the EDRS support available anywhere? We live overseas and came to the U.S. for a residential treatment program, but will return overseas the day after she leaves the program. She will have an RD and therapist in the U.S. who will meet with her over the internet and a local doctor back home.
Sure. So EDRS right now is available in 22 states. Right now we don't have in-person services internationally, and not in all 50 states yet, but we do offer virtual support in the form of our clinical coaching and meal support, and we would have the same process, coordinating care with the team weekly, and you know, reevaluating every 3 to 4 weeks and setting up a schedule of support. So certainly it's possible, you know, if the team feels that it would be appropriate support to put into place as for the transition.
Absolutely, and we have worked with some clients who have traveled overseas for students, you know, to be students abroad, or we definitely can provide virtual support. We just need to be, as Greta pointed out, we just need to make sure that the person is still in contact with their team, that it's effective and that it's helping them, and we would reevaluate after 4 weeks to see if it's still useful for them.
That's so great to know. Thanks for sharing that, ladies. Another question kind of about the specifics about EDRS. One of our attendees is wondering, if you're a client of EDRS, how are you able to have check-in text support? Currently, I just do 1 hour a week of video chatting for coaching around meals, but I'm interested in implementing texting.
Well, that would depend a lot on what you and your team decide is the most supportive for you. It is something that we do have with our clients. Everything is planned in advance, so we would give you a text schedule. It wouldn't be, you know, some people do text support whenever they need it. It would be, we're going to text at this time and then at this time to bookend an event or something like that. And as long as it's something that you're while you're at EDRS, something that your team thinks would be beneficial for you, we would definitely include that in your care.
Right. And the text as well as our phone support is really just an added layer of accountability. So, you know, if it's a book in for an event or just book in for a vulnerable time, we often have clients that struggle, you know, evenings and weekends, and so we might do a phone or a text check-in, say at 4:30 or 5 p.m., and that'll be a set schedule, and then at the end of the evening, unless we set up something in between, we also do a you know, right before they're going to bed, another, you know, text or phone check-in, and then they just have to manage those, you know, 4, 5, 6 hours, and they have a specific plan for the evening, and it really does help to get one kind of through those hard times.
Yeah, what a fantastic resource. Thank you for sharing those details. Just a couple more questions, if that's okay. One of our attendees is wondering, what is a good way to cope with possibly going back into treatment for the holidays? How can it be a positive thing even when family views it as a negative?
It's really hard, particularly if, you know, the family might view it as a negative and you don't really have that support. I think what's most important is that you want to, that you're taking the step that you know is right for you, or that maybe you don't even know that it's right for you, but it's, you know, your team is suggesting it, and you know, you trust your team, and so therefore you're going to make this move. I think just, you know, taking that leap of faith that this is the next right step. If you could do it, you know, outpatient or at the level that you're doing it, you would be doing it, and that it's okay that you're struggling. And oftentimes, I mean, as hard as it is to be in treatment during the holidays, you know, because the holidays can be so hard, you know, it can be, you know, I don't want to say a good time to be in treatment, because no one really wants to be in treatment, but it's a safe time, certainly, if, you know, there are so many, you know, stressors and triggers and influences in your environment.
Absolutely. I think it's a really great thing to do for yourself. It is a really brave choice, and sometimes the holidays are the time when a person begins to realize that it's the only time of year that they have, that they can go into treatment, that they can go into a higher level of care, and it can be the time when things have gotten the hardest and they need it the most. So if you are taking that step, I just want to applaud you for doing the brave and scary thing. Unfortunately, it's never easy, no matter what time of year, to do this. But as Greta did point out, this can be a very challenging time of year to do this outpatient, and to go inpatient can really be a protective way of really tackling your eating disorder right now, when it's most needed, and using this kind of support systems that we're talking about once you've gotten further along in your recovery.
Thank you for answering that, ladies. And we're just about out of time, but one more question, if you don't mind addressing this. One of our attendees is a parent and wondering what are some signs of relapse to be looking for. And she's asking about her daughter who has more of restrictive anorexia, but if you can maybe speak on just some signs of relapse, like around the holidays, that, you know, maybe parents or any loved one should be aware of.
Maiken, do you want to address that first as a dietitian around the food, or would you like me to?
Well, I can give it a little bit of a perspective from my viewpoint. I don't know that I can speak about what parents might see, but I know that when I'm working with a client and I start to see small restrictions, or small restrictions where they start to pull back certain components, there starts to be a buildup of food rules, and I'm starting to notice that, at least from my perspective, their food logs, that certain foods that they had more freedom with in the past, they're not allowing themselves anymore. That's when I would start to say, hey, I'm hearing your eating disorder voice show up in the choices that you're making. Do you hear that?
Mm-hmm.
And start to challenge them on that. That's from a dietitian's perspective. I think what's really difficult is, as a parent, you want to help your child, but you also want them to be able to help themselves, and you don't want to feel like you're the food police and
Mm-hmm.
you're watching everything they eat, and they don't want that either.
Mm-hmm.
So really, unfortunately, though, a lot of our clients communicate through their food behaviors, or have in the past when they've been maladaptive. And so it is important to just keep keep be aware and be present and be conscious and be listening. And if you're starting to notice some of that restrictive behavior, to not try to hide it, um, and to try to approach them. Maybe it's, and I'm going to defer to Greta on this since she's the therapist, but I would imagine that it would be harder to do while they are present with the food. And it might be something to talk to them when the food isn't around,
Mm-hmm.
um, to have, uh, to not add more anxiety to their eating process, and to take away your role as maybe a food police, but to just say, I've been noticing some of these things, I'm concerned about you, and
Exactly.
I care about you, and use I statements. Mostly I found to be really effective with family members who struggle, to, instead of being like, you're not doing your job, you're not recovering right, like, to make it more, I'm concerned, I am scared, I saw this and it alarmed me, you know.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think just to add to that, I mean, like Macon said, any, I was thinking about that first snack that's missed, or, oh, I'm supposed to complete 100% and I completed 90%. Starting just little subtle, changes in the food. Oh, I'm not feeling hungry. I don't think I need that. Starting to hear the uh, kind of eating disorder lies and rationalizations that can come up, or noticing, avoiding, food or meal times, withdrawing, spending more time body checking, wanting to weigh oneself, um, you know, wanting to, start exercising again, you know, when one might, when they're not allowed to, or they're not ready to. There's so many, just depressed mood, um, really just being hyper focused on, really just the eating disorder, whether it's the body image, the food, starting to hear talking about maybe calories, and if they're hearing good and bad foods, noticing a real, an outward struggle and anxiety that's coming up, around the food. And really, as a parent, just listening to your gut, and that, if you're feeling like this seems like, it's heading towards relapsive behavior, then, most often your intuition's going to be correct. Um, and, in therapy with clients, that can happen too. It's kind of like, I hear you saying one thing, this is sounding very familiar, and that is, there's so much denial that can come back so quickly, and to not, if it sounds like that, but you don't want to really, it's like you don't want to really believe that that's what's happening, but listen to that part of yourself that, says, yes, that is what is happening, and really earliest intervention, that you can get is most helpful. Getting into, family therapy, session with the therapist, dietitian, having a plan, everything, just so that if your son or daughter is on their way to relapse, then you can catch it on the front end.
Thank you so much, ladies. And we're just about at the end of our time together, but I just really appreciate you both being here and just not only sharing your own insight and about EDRS, but for taking the time to answer these questions from our audience today. So we really appreciate that. And just a reminder to everyone who's listening, if you're interested in learning more about EDRS, the website is edrs.com. And Greta, would you mind just resharing the toll-free number to you?
Sure, it's 866-525-2766.
Perfect. And you said that inquiries can be submitted directly through the website, right?
The form they can fill out to talk about what services they're interested in, or they can call our number.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Maiken and Greta. It's so wonderful to have you both on with us this evening. And for anyone who's with us in need of more additional eating disorder resources, feel free to check us out at eatingdisorderhope.com, as well as the schedule of our upcoming webinars is listed on the website too. So on behalf of all of us here, thank you for joining us tonight, and have a great evening and happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Thank you so much, Crystal.
Thank you.
Friday.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.